Welcome to Un-fallacy, the video podcast dedicated to logical thinking and targeted analysis of recent public rhetoric. I'm Abigail Smith, and I draw my inspiration from the website yourlogicalfallacyis.com, as well as real-life examples. My hope is that you, dear listener, can use these skills to become a smarter citizen, able to detect untruths, manipulation tactics, and bad ways of thinking. This episode is about the Strawman fallacy. A strawman fallacy is built by constructing a representation of your opponent's position that does not accurately match what she or he is actually saying, and then attacking that false representation. Basically, rather than arguing against what your opponent is saying, you argue against something that he or she isn't saying. It's called the straw man because, just like in a literal sense, it is easier to knock down a man made of straw than a real man. So also in a figurative sense, it is easier to knock down an argument that you wish your opponent were making than the argument she or he is actually making. For example, let's say that in a debate on government spending, Jane says, "We should put more money into health and education." And Mark responds by saying, "I'm surprised that you hate our country so much that you want to leave it defenseless by cutting military spending." Do you notice the bad logic? Jane never mentioned military spending. She was talking about health and education spending. Mark committed a
Strawman fallacy.
Boo!
It's important to notice that a strawman fallacy usually occurs when someone is trying to make the other side look weaker or more ridiculous by taking their position to an extreme. For another example, Elmira, a liberal politician, might criticize conservatives by saying, "They say they want a smaller government. Well, where would we be without roads, schools, and laws?" Do you notice the bad logic? It's easier to attack an extreme position, such as the belief that there should be no government at all, than to attack a more nuanced position, such as that the government should be limited only to certain things. So even though this example only involves one person, it's still a straw man because that person is using extreme language to misrepresent an entire political movement.
That's a strawman fallacy.
Boo! Boo!
There are many ways to commit the strawman fallacy, but here are 3 shortcuts to help you spot the majority of strawman attacks. 1. Assuming the opponent's motives. 2. Extreme language. And 3. Shifting the focus of the argument. If you hear any of these 3 things, there's very likely to be a strawman lurking around somewhere. Now let's look at some recent examples in the current media. Strawmen have been especially noticeable in the recent debates about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. Here's one clip from September 24th, 2013, with Congressmen Ami Bera and Tom McClintock.
That said, it is now the law. So instead of relitigating, the past, let's actually take this law, let's fix it, let's make it about patients and make it better.
Can we separate the two?
You can't ignore the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room right now. What has been a distant theoretical discussion over Obamacare is now becoming a very personal, very practical problem as it is impacting millions of American families who are losing their health plans, who are seeing their premiums absolutely skyrocket, in some cases triple, who are seeing their work hours cut back, all now as a direct result of this. We have got to deal with this.
Did you notice the bad logic there? Essentially, Senator Bera said, "Let's fix the law so that it is better for patients." And essentially, Senator McClintock answered, "You don't want to deal with this, even though people are hurting from it." The straw man that McClintock is raising is that Senator Bera doesn't care that people are hurting from the law, but that is not the argument that Bera actually made.
That's a strawman fallacy.
Here's another recent example, and this may not be as easy to spot the straw man, but do your best. This example comes from May 18th, 2013, from the show Real Time with Bill Maher. In this show, the topic of gun control came up, and 2 celebrities, S.E. Cupp and Michael Moore, began arguing about this controversial topic. By the way, just so you know, in the following clip, I cut out a few places where the conversation got distracted by audience noises and side quips from the other guests on the show. I wanted to show you the actual content of the arguments themselves, but I did not cut out anything actually substantial from the clip. Here it is.
This is why gun owners find this offensive, because it treats law-abiding citizens as if they are guilty until proven innocent.
Correct.
The problem with background checks 5-day waiting periods. They assume that I have criminal intent to use my gun and pursue my Second Amendment rights.
Well, let me take yours.
It's not appropriate.
We, the people, though, that's the majority, by the way, that want gun control.
We don't want to do...
Here's what we want. You can have your gun.
You want to know where I
If you have a dangerous device that can kill 20 school children, I want to know where that device is. That's what I do.
Did you spot the bad logic there? Essentially, Ms. Cupp said gun restrictions assume criminal intent on innocent people. And essentially, Mr. Moore said we should track guns because they are dangerous and can kill children. But Ms. Cupp was not talking about the danger of guns. She was talking about assuming criminal intent. The straw man that Mr. Moore was attacking was that it's inconsequential if we don't track guns. But that was not the argument Ms. Cupp was making. You'll notice that Mr. Moore felt pretty pleased with himself, and the audience was excited. And this is often what happens with the straw man. The person using it feels like they have won a great victory. But remember what I said about straw men being easier to knock down than real men. Mr. Moore totally ignored Ms. Cupp's argument, which is a difficult one to counter, and decided to attack the dangerousness of guns instead, which is much easier. He may have had a good point, but it wasn't relevant to the point brought up by his opponent. So say it with me now.
That's a straw man fallacy!
Now, it's fun to shout at the TV and all, but let's get real. If you're in a debate with someone, shouting fallacies at them probably won't get you far.
You must gain their confidence, make them like you.
Yeah? How do you do that?
You force them to like you, idiot!
When someone you're debating commits the straw man fallacy, it could be due to one of three reasons. Either they are genuinely misunderstanding your point, they are intentionally twisting your point, or they are intentionally ignoring your point because they would rather talk about something else. As fun as it is to think that your opponent is the devil incarnate, I suggest that you always assume positive intent. It's just the polite thing to do. Just gently say, I hear what you're saying, but you didn't really address my point. Or, I don't think your argument there is on topic. We were talking about changing the law, not judging my motives. Or whatever. Then it's very important to get the conversation right back on track. The best way to do that is to make your original point again, but more concisely. Aim for one short sentence. I know that's hard, but misunderstandings are easier when there's a lot of extra words. If you can restate your point in a succinct way, then it's more likely that the other person will be able to respond to it logically. Now, let's talk about how you can avoid stepping into the same fallacy yourself. As I said, the basic problem with the straw man is that there's either a misunderstanding or an intentional twisting or a flat-out ignoring of what the other person says. Now, I'm not going to presume that any of you would ever intentionally twist or ignore something someone says, of course.
Because I'm a lady, that's why.
So let's just presume that if any of you have committed the straw man fallacy, it was an innocent accident. The first thing to do to avoid this fallacy is, wait for it, this is going to be tough for some of you, listen to what the other person is saying. As you are listening, try to summarize in your head what their main points are, and make sure your summaries match what they said. If you need to, repeat back to them, something like, so, am I understanding correctly? You're saying in a nutshell that you want to increase health and education spending, or whatever the topic is. Make it concise and just check that you understand. Get the other person's affirmation that you are correct in your understanding. Then proceed to argue on that point, not on anything else. In addition to arguing more logically, getting into this habit will help you be a better person in all your relationships as well, because, as we all know, good communication strengthens healthy relationships, and listening well is an important part of good communication. Well, that's the straw man. Tune in next time for more logical thinking on the Un-fallacy podcast.